Hi, my name is Ann Edenfield-Sweet. I'm the Executive Director of Wings for Life International, and we are so grateful and happy that you are joining us tonight. Actually, tonight, we have a wonderful speaker, Ariel Schwab, and Ariel interned with us when she was working on her master's, and she worked for us and was in charge of our children's program, and we just love Ariel. But she does a very difficult job, and she is going to talk about a very difficult topic tonight, how to identify sexual abuse in children. This is what she does, and she loves it because she is so caring and so compassionate. But if you've got little ones around and they're listening to this, you might want to maybe have them go do something else. We're suggesting maybe if they're 13 or older, maybe if they want to listen, that would be appropriate. But for younger ones, we just want to kind of protect them a little bit because she is going to be talking about some difficult issues. But these are things that we all need to be aware of. We all need to know, how do we protect our kids? And so we are going to learn tonight from the best. So help me welcome Ariel Schwab. Ariel.
Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate the introduction. It's nice to be here. I wish I could see all of you in person. It's been hard not seeing everybody. I am going to be talking tonight about some hard things, like Anne said, some tough subjects. So I just want your kiddos to maybe not be in the room or maybe put some headphones on. Not just for kiddos, but also for yourself. Know that this is can be some triggering things in my presentation tonight. And so just be good to yourself, and if you need to take a break, please do that for yourself. We're going to be talking about, like Ann said, identifying sexual abuse in children, but also community resources when you do suspect that there's abuse in children occurring. So let's dive right in. What is sexual abuse? What's the definition of child sexual abuse? So this is sexual abuse that applies to any children that are 17 years of age or younger. It's any sexual contact or exploitation with the intent to arouse or gratify another sexual desire or to intrude upon the bodily integrity or personal safety of a child. This also includes non-contact acts such as exhibitionism, exposure to pornography, voyeurism, and communicating in a sexual manner by phone or internet. So how young is too young? Children younger than 13 cannot consent to sexual contact with any older individual. If the child is between 13 and 16 years old, they can legally consent to sex with anyone that is within 14 years of age of them. So if it's a 13-year-old, they can consent to a 17-year-old. Any higher than that, that is considered child sexual abuse. At age 17, they can consent to sex with someone of any age unless that person is an individual that is in a position of authority over that child and uses that authority to coerce the child to submit, uses force or coercion that results in great bodily harm or great mental anguish, is a school employee at the school that the child attends, uses force or coercion and is aided or abetted by one or more person. When the assault or abuse occurs, the person is armed with a deadly weapon, or a person that's committing another felony. So they already have been convicted of a felony and they're doing this again. So let's look at New Mexico. How big is the problem in New Mexico? In 2018, there were 1,383 cases that were investigated by CYFD. And 273 of those were substantiated. So that means that they went through the investigation process and they were found to be true. 1,110 were unsubstantiated. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that all of those children, it didn't happen to them, but for investigation purposes, they weren't able to identify enough information. If the child is 13 years or older, they can take confidential services. So they can request help if they are experiencing child abuse, but they do not have to report their abuse. So that could be So we could be looking at even higher numbers there, right? So how do we find out about child sexual abuse? We find out through children's disclosures. So the overwhelming majority of sexual abuse or assault cases become known because the child discloses about their abuser. This is often years, especially in children, this is often years after it has begun or occurred. Very rarely is a child sexual abuse witnessed or discovered by somebody else. What are the reasons? Why don't kids tell until later on? There's several reasons. A couple of those is we often see that the abuser is very close to them. So this could be a family member, a family friend. They're close to the family. They've gained trust with the family, with the child, and that child doesn't want them to get in trouble. Oftentimes we see that the child has been told to keep a secret, so they don't want to tell on the person. The abuser oftentimes is a person in a position of power over the family, whether that might be financial or providing emotional support. And so, again, the child doesn't want to break the family unit, hurt the family unit. Another reason why children don't tell is the shame that's around it. There's a lot of stigmas in society about abuse. And not wanting to be a disappointment to their parents. So maybe they have a really good relationship with their parents, and this isn't something that they've told them. They don't want to disappoint their parents and tell them. So kids don't often react the way that we expect when abuse is occurring. So they'll pretend, we call it the flight, fight, or freeze. So they pretend to be asleep during the events that happen. They don't often physically fight the offender because, again, that flight, fight, or freeze, kids freeze up. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. They're not going to scream for help because their body is in crisis mode. Some children protest but are silenced by the abuser. So again, children are smaller. Usually people in position of power do this to them. They're going to be bigger than them. Another thing to know is that children rarely tell their parents first. So we will get parents in saying, why didn't they come and tell me? Why didn't they tell me that this happened? They told their best friend, or they told a school counselor. And just know that it's often that kids don't tell their parents. They do go to somebody else just to test the water. So what are some concerning behavioral changes to look for in a child that's been sexually abused? Oftentimes they will act out with anger or aggression. We look at how are they doing in school? Have their grades just dropped really unexpectedly without any other explanation? How about unexplained sleep changes or appetite? So are they getting up and having night terrors in the middle of the night and this isn't normal behavior? Are they all of a sudden needing to eat all the time, or maybe they don't want to eat at all, and these are extremes that they're going through? Another indication could be suicidal ideations. So are they saying, I don't want to be here anymore? These are concerning behaviors. Along with that, and this PowerPoint will be on the website. You can take a look at some of these other behaviors that we look at that are very tied to traumatic exposures. Getting easily startled, resistance to going places or to being around certain people, isolating themselves, they're moody. Those are some of the other behaviors that we look at in kids. What are some physical indicators? They're with this person alone, and they come back home, and there's bruising, there's hickeys, there's injuries that would be connected to assault. Oftentimes, there might be vaginal discharge or bleeding in a prepubertal child. This is an indicator because children are rarely have these physical symptoms if nothing is happening. So sexual behaviors, what's normal and what's not normal in a child? Because there are normal sexual behaviors in children. And a lot of times parents come in and they say, well, my child is touching themselves, and I don't know where they got this from. Just because they're touching themselves does not necessarily mean that they've been sexually abused. This is actually a very common sexual behavior for a child. It says 2 to 6, but it's actually 2 to 9. They figure out that it feels good and they're going to keep on doing it. Doesn't necessarily mean that they've been abused. This is also going to be on the website for you to go ahead and view. These are common behaviors. And then we also have concerning sexual behaviors. So this would be that they might have been exposed to pornography. They might have been involved in an incident with sexual abuse. These would be something to look at. Again, this is from 6 to 9. These will all be on the website, 6 to 9 concerning sexual behaviors. So what does it look like when a child has come to you and told you that they've been sexually abused? Any child under 17 perpetrated on by any person, including a family member, a person in a position of power or authority, not a family member, or a person in a position of authority. First thing you want to do is you want to notify your local police department where the crime occurred. It's in your house and it was in Bernalillo County, you're going to call APD. And I've put the phone number there. The non-emergent number is 242-COPS or 2677. Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, that's also the number to get a hold of them if you need them. Call your local law enforcement. The second thing you're going to want to do is call your local Child Protective Service Agency. Here in New Mexico, we have CYFD, Child, Youth, and Families Department. Call them. You can do #safe from any cell phone or the 1-855-333-SAFE, which is 7233. So oftentimes when we call the police department, they're going to cross-report with CYFD automatically. But just to cover your bases, it's always good to call in a child safety for CYFD report and also call in your law enforcement. The next thing you're going to want to do is, you'll probably do this while you're on the phone with law enforcement, is to determine the last possible contact with that perpetrator. So when was the last time that child had any contact with the offender alone? If it's before 72 hours, they would qualify for a SANE exam, sexual assault nurse examiners. They do what's known as rape kits, where they collect DNA. If the offender has not been in contact with the child for over 72 hours, which is 3 days, they would be seen at Para los Niños, but that will be a little while down the line. Para los Niños is not a self-referral clinic, so we do not take call-ins from families to see right away. It does have to go through a process. So what does that process look like? For New Mexico, we use a multidisciplinary team, MDT approach to investigation, and that's when medical care will begin down the line. So the first thing is the investigation is initiated by protective services and or law enforcement. So CYFD and law enforcement are going to do their due diligence and investigate as far as they possibly can. The next step is if the police or CYFD feel that it's necessary, the child is going to go for what's called a forensic interview. In Bernalillo County, we have what's called All-Face Safe House, and they have trained experts who question children about what happened, but in a way that they're not leading the child, so they ask open-ended questions. In Los Lunas, we have Valencia County Shelter Services, and they also do forensic interviews there, so it really depends on what county you go to. Mostly here in Albuquerque, we have all faiths. So what happens after that forensic interview? The child was in their forensic interview and they didn't disclose anything happened. Well, at that point, there will not be a referral made for medical care because the child didn't say anything. But let's say that child was in the forensic interview and they disclosed skin-to-skin contact. Then All Faiths will take that referral and they will send it to Para los Niños, and we review every single case to make sure that they qualify for an exam. If a child discloses maybe somebody touched them over the clothes, that would not qualify them for a medical exam because there wouldn't be any contact. So what does a Para los Niños appointment look like? We do allow 2 hours for an appointment. This is so that the child doesn't feel rushed at all. There's no hurry. We are able to get really good medical and social history from the guardians. And then we have a doctor or nurse practitioner talk with the child. So the history with the guardians, we get their medical history, we get their account of what happened during the incident, we get the last contact of an alleged offender, what they've noticed as far as behavior changes in the child, what kind of therapy involvement the child is in. We give resources to the guardian and education. Like I said, we do have doctor and nurse practitioners on our team. We have a doctor that's actually the only child abuse pediatrician in New Mexico on our team. We also have 2 nurse practitioners that are trained in child sexual abuse. And then we have a pediatric gynecologist that does follow-ups for our children. So they're going to go through, does the child know their anatomy? They're going to ask open-ended questions, and these questions are purely for the medical exam. So how can we best help that child medically? And what going into the exam does the doctor or nurse practitioner need to look for? We allow all of our children to decide whether or not they want the exam. They've already had choices taken from them, so we don't want to take anything else from them. So we offer an exam, especially to older children, 13 and up. It really is their decision. We like to try to get all of the children STI screened, but again, that's up to them. So what does the exam look like, the medical exam? Our doctors check the heart, they check the lungs, eyes, ears, and throat. The cool thing that we do at our clinic, though, is an external genital exam with video colposcopy. It's a hard word. But basically, it's this machine that you see on the PowerPoint, and it is not only for the doctor or nurse practitioner to be able to magnify the child's genitals, but also to record. Why would we record this, right? It stays in our clinic. It's for us to be able to, if anything were to come up abnormal, for us to be able to go back and look at it without having to give the child another exam. So it's really important that we have this machine. We also do sexually transmitted infections testing. That's going to include a swab in the mouth. It's going to include a swab in the bottom. They're teeny tiny little Q-tips. We do test the urine. Depending on what the child discloses, if there were any bodily fluids exchanged, we do blood work as well. We also offer birth control for 13-year-olds and up, and the HPV vaccine. So what are some of the benefits of having a Para los Niños exam? So I've got a lot of statistics here, but what's really important to know is that children we don't see any physical findings when we do an exam. So a lot of people think that a child's cherry could have been popped if they had been sexually abused. That's just not the case. When you're saying that, it's a cultural myth. When you're saying that, you're talking about a hymen, especially in girls, right? And the hymen actually already has a hole in it. So people think that that is popped, in a sense, and that they're no longer a virgin. What we like to, our biggest education point here, is that there's no such thing. And if the hymen didn't have a hole in it, the child later on, for females, would not be able to have a period. So a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, you can definitely just look and be able to tell that the child's not a virgin anymore. That's just not the case. And the reason that we do these exams, so if you're not finding anything physically, why do this, right? We want to make sure that the child knows that their body looks normal. This is so important, especially going forward in life. We hear a lot of children say, well, I don't think that somebody is going to be able to tell if they look down there, and that's not the case. No one's going to be able to tell unless you tell them. We want to make sure that that child is healthy, and going forward, they know they're healthy, and it's a clean slate. We also want to reduce the risk of the public health risk that STIs pose. So in prepubertal children, STI symptoms are non-existent. You rarely see them. So you want to make sure that going forward, they don't have anything, so we're able to treat those. We also assess for suicidal ideation or other trauma-related psychological effects. We coordinate care with law enforcement and CYFD on a regular basis. And the other benefit of having a PLN exam is that a medical provider can testify in court for the patient, and it's not considered hearsay. So one of our providers can be subpoenaed to court and say, look, just because there wasn't any physical findings, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. This child disclosed, and they said what happened, and we believe that, because children don't lie about sexual abuse. So again, you can look on the website. There are some STIs, sexually transmitted infections, that can be transmitted through sexual contact, and then there are some that are not related to sexual contact. So all of this is done, right? And you've gone through your Paternos Niños exam. Now what? How do you help that child or adolescent recover after this? Because it is hard. There's a lot of things that go with it. First thing is reassure your child that you and other adults are doing everything possible to keep them safe. They really need to know that. They need to know that this offender is not going to be able to get to them anymore. Be available and willing to talk about the incident if the child wishes. It's not helpful to go and ask them questions, honestly. Let them go through their process. Really, therapy is the biggest thing. You want to get your child involved in therapy. Answer them honestly. Don't make false promises to them. I understand that it's really hard. We want to tell them that this person is going to pay for what they did, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that they do, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. Make sure you return to normal routines and predictable schedules as soon as possible. Make things stable for that child. Again, keep them safe, right? Teaching healthy coping skills together. Maybe start walking together or doing some yoga. Understand that you might see some initial regressions in behavior. So when that happens, just please try and stay calm, even and especially when the child isn't. And set limits, but in a gentle and calm manner. Make sure you're consistent and reliable. Again, they need to know they have that stable environment, and engage in cultural healing practices and rituals. We always think that teachers and medical providers are the only ones that can report sexual abuse, but that's just not true. If you see something, please say something. The New Mexico mandatory reporting law requires anyone with knowledge of suspected child abuse or neglect to report it to the appropriate authorities. This is mandatory reporting, applies to all individuals, and it's not limited to teachers or healthcare professionals. Again, I've put that 242 COPS number on there. Also BCSO and CYFD is pound safe. Here's a list of really good resources that we give out to our clients. This is for different therapies. It's for individual parents. I always encourage you. You need to be able to take care of your kids, so please help them by helping yourself. And these will be available on the website as well. Here's some classes and groups. And the last thing that I just want to put on there, because especially with our adolescents, we have the crisis text line. It is 741-741. They don't like talking so much, so sometimes texting is appropriate for them. And I think that's it. Thanks so much.
Well, Ariel, thank you very much. This is a very, very difficult subject to talk about. And you did it in a very professional and a loving way. Some of you might be listening and are not in the Albuquerque area. There will be resources on the web in your communities for the same kinds of things. Or you certainly can go to these resources that Ariel has listed, and the information is going to be the same and kind of consistent. It doesn't matter what county you live in, what state you live in, or what country you live in. If somebody's been abused, people need to know about how to deal with this. So I hope that this will be helpful. I hope that you have not experienced any of your children, any of these issues, but tragically way too many Americans have, and way too many children have. So we felt we needed to address this very difficult subject to be able to help the entire population and all the folks that we work with. Now, you know I always close with a story. So I'm going to try to close with a little upbeat story here that is not quite so difficult, but it's so true. So this is called Children Live What They Learn. If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with security, they learn to have faith. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. And if children live with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love. So we want our children to find love in a really positive, healthy, wonderful way. So I thank you for being with us tonight. If you are on Facebook and YouTube, this will be the end of our program. If you are on Zoom, stay tuned because we're going to go to breakout rooms. So thanks again, Ariel. Thanks again for all of you for being with us tonight. And see you next week, 6 o'clock, right here at Wings for Life International. Thanks so much and have a good night.